We are up to Daf Mem Amud Aleph, and the Mishnah told us that you cannot buy an esrog from an Amma Oretz. Somebody doesn't really perhaps abide by the laws of Shemitah. A lulav you can, and we explained that when it comes to a lulav, we look at when it began to blossom, and that's in the 6th year. By esrog, we look at the year that it was picked on the 7th year, and even though we brought a machlekes about mice, and it seems everybody agrees when it comes to Shemitah. By Esrog, we treat it like a tree. So we brought another opinion that says the elders of Usha and the Chachamim who are arguing with them, we brought from the Chachamim arguing with them that when it comes to Shemitah, they hold as well that an Esrog is not treated like a tree. It is treated like a yerek, a vegetable, and that is that it grows. You look at when you picked it. So now we're up to the Gemara. The Gemara asked a question regarding trees generally. What do you have to tell me? Because it's the 6th year, even the 7th year, trees are not included in the laws of Shemitah. Why should trees not be included in the laws of Shemitah? Only the fruits, the edible part, not the tree. The Gemara will explain. So the Gemara will ask, so why do we need to tell me a story about whether it's similar to a tree, dissimilar to a tree? Says the Gemara, we're about 9 lines, 10 lines on top of the page. In the middle of the line, Tama. Timer, the lulav, you told me the whole reason why the lulav is different by shishi and the shri, because it's the 6th year going to 7th year. The shri is kaddish, but if it would, let's say, for example, start growing in the 7th year, would be considered a shemitah tree. And why is that? Eitzim ba'almahu, all it is a piece of wood, and we know that the eitzim, when it comes to the wood part of the tree, the bark, ain't boy the hen mishum kedusha shri. There is no law of shemitah when it comes to the actual tree itself, and why not? Because then we learn alek kanim, the leaves of reeds, or alek fan, the leaves of vines, should give on the chayva. You collected them to put them in a cave to hold it for a while, to store it. Al pnei hasadem, if while they're on the field, right? Lokton lachila. So you gather them from the field and you put them away. So it depends why you collected these leaves. You collected the leaves in order to eat them, then it's treated like food. Yesh behem mishum kedusha shvi. They have the laws of shvius. Lokton le'eitzim, if you collected them to be wood, ain behem mishum kedusha shvius. If you collect them to be wood, there is no kedusha shvius at all, because wood is not edible. The Gemara will explain why wood maybe is different. And we're going to explain that one of the definition of the definition of acha, food is not just, it's a paradigm, it's an example, and that is just like food, the consumption of it and the benefit from it happens simultaneously. You're eating it, you're destroying it, and you're enjoying it. So any kind of any other product where the hana and the beer and the consumption of it is taking place in tandem, that's when we say that it is forbidden. But by wood, first you burn it, let's say, and then it turns into coal, and afterwards you go ahead and bake with it. So the destruction of it and the consumption of it is not happening at the same time as the benefit. Therefore, it's not included in the laws of Shemitah. So wood should not be included. So answers the Gemara, shiny hustle. There it's different. The Omakro, it says in Pasuk, where do we learn that wood is not included? It says in Pasuk, Lachem, that it should be a year of lying the ground fallow, and it should be Lachem la'achel. Whatever you have there, you should eat for you and your servant, and so on and so forth. Lachem la'achel, that you can consume. So we learn that things which you have benefit from is what do you call it? Is where you have the laws of Shemitah, and also has to be similar to that where the Hana and the beer both happen at the same time. Only where the consumption and the benefit happen concurrently. Yotzu eitzim, the wood is different. You don't get any benefit until after its consumption. So therefore, wood is not included. And we're going to explain, but when it comes to a lulav is primarily used for a broom. And by a broom, as you use it, you're destroying it. And therefore the benefit, which is sweeping, and the destruction of it, the sweeping as well, which can ruins the different twigs, the leaves, and everything, the twigs, is happening at the same time. And therefore there is shemitah when it comes to a lulav, and that's why we have to come up with other reasons that it was talking about that it began to grow in the 6th year. Says the Gemara. What do you mean? If so, how can you say with such an open-ended statement that all wood is no good? But because wood is for burning, even wood for burning, sometimes it happens in tandem, not wood that you turn into coal, but wood that you use for actual firewood, to use for light. What about a wood, the mishkan, which is very oily? And those pieces of wood, when you light them, they take a long time to burn, and they use them as light. The hanhosan ubiyudan shava, since it's used like a torch, like a light. So then the benefit, which is while it's burning, and the destruction while it's burning, are happening at the same time. So how come the Braisa doesn't allow for that? Rava says that generally wood is made for firewood, and firewood you don't have any benefit till afterwards. So therefore, there's no din of shvius, even if you collect them in order to use them as light. We look at the majority of the wood, and the majority of the wood are not meant to be used as firewood, but rather the majority of wood is meant to be used to turn into coal. And therefore, it doesn't apply to Shemitah. Lulav them are different because they're used for brooms, and that's why they are different. And that's why in the case of the alekanim, they're used for animal food, animal feed. So therefore, that is not collected to be turned to coal, and that's stam collected for food, and that's why that's not included in the laws of Shemitah. Okay, says the Gemara further. So there's two ways to learn Pshat Gemara. Is it that stam wood is considered firewood, but the tak, if you broke it off, and your intention was to use it to light as a torch, then maybe it would be included in Shemitah. But stam, you say that if firewood, or like others learn, that even if you had in mind, doesn't matter. All wood is considered firewood, and we don't look at any exceptions. Says the Gemara, well, this whole concept, whether the Shemitah, when it comes to eitzim or not, is actually machlekes tanaim. Eitzim l'sokah tanaim is machlekes tanaim. Tanya, we learned ein moisin peide shviyas. We don't want you to use fruits of shviyas, lo'il mishra, not to soak, let's say, flax in wine of Shemitah to give it nice fragrance. The lo'il kvusa, not to wash in it. And not to wash in anything to do with Shemitah. Now, these cases are with the Hana is not taking place at the same time. You're washing it, you're ruining the wine, let's say, but you're not going to have any benefit from it till afterwards when you wear it. So therefore, and yet it says you're not allowed to. And the Rabbi Yossi says, Rabbi Yossi clearly says that you're allowed to. You're allowed to. My time, but Tanakama. In other words, so we see clearly from here that the machlekes whether this idea that the hana and the beer have to happen simultaneously or not is an argument between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yossi. Tanakama says no, and Rabbi Yossi says yes. Says the Gemara. My time, but Tanakama. What's the larger Tanakama? Why he says that you're not allowed to soak in it, even though the hana and the beer not happening at the same time. No more across the pasuk. It says the pasuk this year you shall let the lie fallow. Lachem la'achla. It's for you. You, and we generally say for you means to have hana la'achla to eat. So we say it's the la'achla is coming to limit, and what v'loy mission not to soak it, not to launder it. My time, but Rabbi Yossi. What's the logic of Rabbi Yossi? Says that that's not an issue. The only time we're bored is when the hana and the beer happen at the same time. But you're allowed to launder. On Makra, it says lachem. The word lachem comes to expand the usage or the allowances. And even though lachem comes to limit, lachem comes to expand, and that is lachem lechol tzarchechem. You can use it for everyone, not just for consuming it. You can use it for laundering it. But filamishter lekusa. So now we'll go through how each one deals with the other person's pasuk with Tanakama. It says lachem, which comes to it, which is expansive, and you're limiting it only to food. Let's say ahu lachem doing lachili. You know what you're permitted to use other things for? Only if you do it in the same way as food, which is that they can mi shahana asay ubiyure shava. When do we have the laws of Shemitah? When do they have the laws of Shemitah? If and you're allowed to have benefit if the hana and the beer happen at the same time. And the exception is when things that you're not allowed to use on Shemitah things with the Hana and the beer, not no. When at the same time that we're saying that the laws of Shemitah apply, we're also saying you're allowed to use it. When are you allowed to use? The Tanna Kama says, when do we say you can use things on Shemitah only if it's similar to La'achla with the Hana and the beer at the same time? If the things are not Hana beer at the same time and it's not similar to Achla, you cannot have any benefit from it. So you're not allowed to use it at all. But Rabbi Yasi, he says there's no laws of Shemitah when it comes to laundering all that. Why? Because it says lachem, you can use it for whatever you want, including laundering and soaking. Rabbi Yasi says achla, it's limited to eating. You can only use it for something that everybody benefits from it, or everybody uses it for that purpose. Not, for example, using it for therapeutic reasons. If it's for medicine, then only sick people need it, not everybody else. That you cannot use a Shemitah. That you can eat but not use for medicine. Maybe come and tell you that has to be with the Hana and the beer has to be at the same time. We cannot learn both things from this. Two separate principles. Either the principle that I guess the consumption and the benefit both happen at the same time. That's what you're permitted, but things which don't happen at the same time, you're not permitted to use at all on Shemitah, for example, wood, or we say that it's coming to tell you only something which is used by everybody, not something which is used by only certain select group of people. So how do you know which one it is? Maybe it's coming to tell you that Hana and beer have to be at the same time. We're asking Rabbi Yasi, it says lachem. Lachem, it comes to expand Hare Kusa, anything, even if Hana and beer don't happen at the same time. So how many became la'achla? What do I do with the words la'achla? Is la'achla to eat and not for medicine. Mari, so we have two choices. Either to include the Hana and the beer not at the same time, or to and exclude those like medicine, or exclude the Hana and beer don't happen at the same time. So Mara Isla Rabbas Lakusa. Why did you decide that to include what you laundered and to exclude what do you call medicine? Marban is akusa. I include the kusa sheshava b'chalada. I include the kusa because it's equal to everybody. I believe it's more important. It has to be something lachem to everybody. It has to be something that unites everybody. That's something that's only for a select group of people. And medicine is only something select group of people. Food, on the other hand, food is something that everybody has to eat. So therefore, I'm going to exclude medicine. Says the Gemara, so who's author of the following brayso? It says to eat, but not for medicine. Then you're not allowed to use food or Shemitah for medicinal purposes because it's limited to a group of people. Or you can eat, you can consume the wine, but don't use it with ligmar. That's how people used to pour wine on the floor to give it some nice fragrance to their apartment, in their little hut. You're not allowed to do that with Shemitah wine and la'achla to eat, to eat and not to make from that afiktivizm. Afiktivizm means something that causes them to vomit. Again, similar to medicinal purposes, and that is only limited. Come on, that obviously follows Rabbi Yasi. Rabbi Yasi is the one who said you're not allowed to use the Shemitah products for something that only a select group of people would require. If the Rabban agree with that, they would also include Mishra Kvisi, not allowed to use Shemitah food for soaking things in it, like the wine of Shemitah, not allowed to use to soak things in it, or to launder. Okay, so that finishes that sugya. So anyway, getting back to lulav, we said that lulav, since the Hana and the beer happen at the same time, it's included in all the laws of Shemitah, and that is because it's included in all the laws of Shemitah, because when you sweep the floor, you're throwing it at the same time, and we're following the Rabbanan, because according to Rabbi Yasi, maybe it's different, but we're following all the laws of Rabbanan, and therefore we are talking about the 6th year going to the 7th year, and we look at a tree when it began to blossom, which means in the 8th year you couldn't use a lulav that started to grow. Shemitah was picked in Tishrei. On the other hand, the neslig you could, because it was picked in the 8th year. But look on esrig at the time when you pick it. Tell you about it further. Another machlekes here. When it comes to Shemitah, generally we learn that if you have something, let's say, Ma'aser Sheni, you swap it over for money and you bring the money to Shalayim, and the Ma'aser Sheni, the food that was the first 10%, then is no longer considered holy. You can do with it whatever you want. It's the money that the Kedusha is transferred to. When it comes to Shemitah, you also can transfer the Shemitah, the holiness of Shemitah, onto money, but here, the original food is still considered Shemitah, that you have to consume it by the time when everything is gone from the fields. Plus, additionally, the money that you use also has the Shemitah, which means you have to use up this money by that same time. And that's why we don't want to buy anything from an Amaretz, because we're scared that the money they will not consume in time. That's why you're only allowed to give them enough for 3 meals and so on. Only what they need for daily expenses. Now, I have an argument. How do you transfer the Kedusha to something else? In other words, the original Kedusha stays where it stays, but how does it also pass on to something else? So, Amar Rabbi Elazar, Ein Shvius Mischaleles Ela Derech Mekah. Rabbi Elazar says that Shvius will not be swapped over only if you do it in a way of purchasing, as we learn from a pasuk. Rabbi Yechon says, Bein Derech Mekah, Bein Derech Chavir. Says it doesn't matter whether you purchase it. It doesn't matter whether you swapped it. In both cases, the Kedusha gets transferred onto the money as well. He explains, in other words, according to Rabbi Yechanan, according to Rabbi Elazar, if he just said that the Kedusha Shemitah should be Mechalel, should be transferred to the money, it won't work. You have to do it in the manner of buying and selling. If I buy something from you, let's say Shemitah things, and I give you money. So that money, like if I go to the Amaris and I buy the esrog, which happens to be Shemitah esrog, then the money as well becomes Shemitah money. So it says the Gemara, my time, Rabbi Elazar, what's his logic to see? If it says the pasuk, Yishnas haYevel haZoyr, it comes to year Yevel, everything goes back to their family. And the next pasuk it says, because Yevel is holy, it says that in the next pasuk, it says, then it says if you happen to sell property and all the laws over there. It says the Gemara talks about Shnas haYevel, Yevel and Shemitah are very similar. And then right afterwards it says, can make a sale. So we're going to darshan the fact that the juxtaposition of these two psukim tells us that if you want that some kedusha to be transferred to something else, it has to be in a manner of kisim kurim have to be sell, not through swapping. Rabbi Yechon, what's his logic? Why does it say to be both ways? My time in the sea. It says in the pasuk, ki yovel he kodesh. It says in the pasuk that yovel is similar to kodesh. Kodesh is kachim. What do we know about kachim? Ma kodesh, bein derech mekach, bein derech chil. When it comes to kachim, it doesn't matter whether you just take money and you swap the kedusha of the animal to the money, or whether you buy the animal outright. So that therefore, afshri is bein derech mekach, bein derech chil. Both ways are good enough. Because it says by kodesh, if you want to redeem your animal, you have to pay an extra fifth. And it says upada. It says clearly in the pasuk that you can go ahead and redeem it. And then it says v'im lo yigol v'nimker. So that's buying. It says both things clearly, and we're comparing Shemitah Gable to Rabbi Yechon. What does he do with the other pasuk? What does he do with that? The Boile, he uses that for a totally different concept. Look at Rabbi Yechon, the Tanya we learned. Rabbi Yechon says, come and see, come and see how difficult it is, how tough it is. The dust of Shemitah. So you have avak lashon hara. Whenever it's not the primary Easter, just like a peripheral. We call it dust. The dust of Shemitah, not selling on Shemitah, the produce is only the dust. The Torah says don't plant and don't harvest and all that. And then later we added on was don't sell either. So it's called lavaka. So look how tough it is if you go ahead and you start doing business with Shemitah products. And that is Adam If a person starts out by dealing with Shemitah to make money, that's the dust of Shemitah. Is l'seif. And ultimately, after he lists, goes through the parsha, the different subjects, including selling as an eved. L'seif. The next stage is, it cascades down. Moichid metal club. He ends up having to sell all of his loose items because he can't even get it back. It says that everybody goes back, which talks about selling, and it goes back to their properties, only the property, but not the metalclin, not the loose items, the portable items. You sell things to your friend. In other words, because you misbehaved in Shemitah, inexorably this is what's going to happen. Eventually, you'll be selling out all your goods. So that's what we use the idea of the chisim kurim empis. Talking as a punishment, this is what's going to happen if you don't treat it properly. What does he do with the pasuk of Rabbi Yechon where it says kodeshi? So he says another din altogether. It's not another admonishment, but actually it's another din. The din is I just told you that if you swap Shemitah, the original stays Shemitah, and the money that, for example, you swap it to also becomes Shemitah. What about if there are a number of swaps? As we're going to see, you swap your excuse me, your Shemitah product for another food item. So A to B and the B to C for another food item, C to D, and eventually you get to the money which is E. So A and E will become Kodesh, but all those in the interim, every time you swap the middle ones, they lose their kedusha, they pass on to the next one. That's what you need Kodesh for. Kiyevil he Kodesh, ma Kodesh Teifes is done. What's a Kodesh? It the money becomes holy. Afshvi there's a demah. That also Shemitah, the money becomes holy. So this is what we're learning. The money becomes holy as well. And we'll soon see what I just told you. We learn Kavas Rablaza. We look up. So according to Rablaza, Kodesh tell you that the new money becomes holy as well. We look at Rablaza Tanya. We also learn the Brayso similar to Rablaza says Shvi is Tefeses as the Mer Shemitah. If you buy Shemitah products with money, the money itself will also become Kodesh. You know, it says Kodesh. It's Yevli. It is Kodesh to you. Ma Kodesh Tefes Adama. We're comparing it to Hegdish like Hegdish. The money becomes holy. But also, and it's forbidden. Afshvi is Tefeses as the Mer becomes holy. So I need the word Kodesh to tell me that the new product, the money, becomes Kodesh as well, holy as well. Not like Rabbi Yechon, I learned from there. Just like Kachim, you can transfer the Kedusha Ayim either via selling or via redeeming. Same thing over here. No, I need the pasuk to inform us that the money that I use does in itself becomes holy. Ima Kodesh, if you're going to compare it, if you're going to equate it to Kodesh, let's go all the way and say, just like Kodesh, Teif is done up, and say you're redeeming an animal that came up with a carbon. The money becomes holy, the Yetzel Chulin, the original animal goes out to Chulin. The Af Shvi is Tefeses, the Mer, the Yetzel Chulin, so maybe it should be the same thing. The money becomes Shemitah, but the original Shemitah item, the Grun Shemitah, does not. It loses its Shemitah, and you can keep it and do whatever you want with it. It says in the passage that Kodesh, that everything remains the way it is. Okay, so lokach bepeda shvi is basar. If you bought with the peda shvi, you use peda shvi to buy yourself meat. So now the kedusha is transferred to meat, but the original pedas are still shmita. So they're both now considered shmita products. They both have to be destroyed in shmita when everything gets finished. The product is finished in the fields before there's malabir. But what happens if lokach bebasar dogim? You purchase with the meat, so number item B, the second generation, you bought fish, which now the third generation. Yotza basa, the meat now loses its kedusha because it's not essentially a shmita product; it's just something on the surface. But you just transfer it from there to the next product. And dogim take over. Lokach bedogim yain. Then generation 3 went to generation 4. You transfer the fish into wine. Yotza dogim and yain. Then the fish again, which is only like an interim thing, which is only on the surface, loses its kedusha and passes it on to the wine. And then you went on further, you swapped the wine to oil, you have to handle shemen. Okay, just about what's the rule? The word kodesh we learn on anything new ultimately becomes the shmita. But a pri-atman also, but the fruit that actually grew in shmita, that also remains also, because as tiya, it should remain. The original, the one that actually grew in shmita remains also. It remains a shmita fruit. So this is Rabbi Elazar's right. Constantly, all the examples we gave, we said lokach he bought. We don't say anywhere here that he swapped. Doesn't that prove Rabbi Elazar's point that the only way to transfer the kedusha shmita to another product is via buying? Only through buying and not through swapping. Tanya goes up. That's a bright support of Elazar. Look at whether it's shmita. Whether it's Ma'aseh Mischalin al Behema Chayev Oif, whether it's Shemitah, whether it's Ma'aseh Sheni, you can swap it. It's clearly here. You can swap it on a Behema, on a Chayev, and on an Oif. Ben Chayim, Ben Shchutim, whether they're alive, whether they're dead, you can swap the Kedusha. And one of the things he talks about here is Shemitah, and he talks about swapping. Chachamim say through Chil. The Chachamim say, Al Shchutim Mischal. We agree with you that on animals that are dead, you can swap, but we're not going to allow you shmita and ma'aseh sheni to on chayin mischal. We're not going to allow you to swap it for living animals, and the reason is why not? Only with Rabban. We are concerned. We know when it comes to ma'aseh, you have to give the ma'aseh animals of this year has to be whatever ma'aseh it is. You have to take care of it this year and the next year. Shana b'shana. We don't want you to mix years. And we're scared when it comes to ma'aseh sheni. If you're going to swap it to animals, you're not going to get rid of it by the year end, and you're going to let it grow because you want the animals to stay there. So you're not you can raise a whole herd, not just veal, but proper animals. You can raise a whole herd, entire herd from these animals. And therefore, we don't want you to have it. The same thing with Shemitah. We're scared that you're going to leave it longer because you want to create a herd. So this only Rabbanan is forbidden. But what do we see clearly from here? What word do we use all the time? We talk about swapping and selling for sure, but swapping. So doesn't that prove, like Rabbi Yechon, that swapping and selling are two formats or two forms of passing the kedusha for Shemitah to one to the next. It says the Gemara, Amar Rav Zerava, machlekes, the whole machlekes is charim. The whole machlekes is by males. Why? Because generally we don't need males for the create a herd, because you have one male can impregnate a whole bunch of cows. It's the female. When it comes to the nekeva females, everyone agrees we don't want you to allow you to swap it for living animals, because we're scared you're going to want to create a herd, and meantime you're going to miss, Spine Shane, you're going to go into next year and so on. We're scared that you might raise herds. But when it comes to males, that's the machlekes. Because males is a step away, so it's like two derabbanans, or is it like one gzeira? Do we say, look, first of all, a male is not a problem at all, but male next time you have a female, and that's not a problem either. Only we're worried you're going to leave it there to raise a herd. That's like a double rabbanan. Rabbanan said so far we're not going to be machmir, and the male said we are. Rashi says, Rashi says, the whole machlekes of Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Yechon. Let's just quick go to Mishnah because it's the same subject, and we can finish the subject of Shemitah. Rashi said this whole argument, Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Yechon, whether the way to transfer kedusha is only through selling, or whether it's through swapping and selling, is machlekes is the pirishon, the original Shemitah fruit. How do you transfer the kedusha from there to the next stage? Abel the prisheni. But when it comes to the second stage, once this kedusha has been transferred already, let's say you did it the correct way according to both visions. Once you transferred it, let's say to you use meat to buy your payers, and now you transfer the meat. Since the meat it never became part of the meat, it's only sort of on the surface. It's easy to transfer the kedusha from the second generation to the third. Everyone holds you can do it either selling or swapping. So why does the Braisa, when it continues down the track, second, third, fourth generation, continues saying that we're always accentuating the mode of buying and selling, which was Rabbi Lazar's proof that it has to be only through buying. I did it. If everyone agrees, once you get past the second generation, you can do anyway. Because I did it. Only because it flows. Because you start off about buying, you continue talking about buying. Question: what are you talking about? Mishi Yeshloi Seller Shel Shvius. It says if somebody wants to so the center as follows. Somebody wants has a seller a shemitah. He has money, shemitah money. He wants to buy a shirt. So we're talking now about second generation, right? Money. The money's already. We obviously use it to buy to sell pair of shvius. So the money you got in its place is second generation. Now you want to cleanse that money. How do you cleanse that money? What you do? You want to use the money for other things. Not for, because if otherwise anything you buy with the money you have to consume by the time you limit to what you can buy, and you have to retreat like shemitah, and it has to consume it by this amount of beer. But you don't. You want to buy yourself a car with it. The Ketzad Yasa, what you do? Go to a storekeeper, that you're comfortable with, and he knows you, and he'll do you a favor. But this is what you say to him: 10 liba seller pays. I want to buy fruits, and here's my coin. So now the fruits that I bought are no longer considered shemitah. And the money now is transferred to this guy here, and then he gives me back the money. He gives me the money as a gift. So therefore, because he gave me the money as a gift, the money is no longer kodesh. Because when I gave him the money, and he gives me no more kodesh. So what happened was, what do you call it? So what happens? I gave you the money. The fruits that I have in my hand are no longer kodesh. So I say to him, I'm going to give you these fruits as a matana. I'm going to give you this coin as a matana. Now, the money, so I'm giving back the fruits. The money now that I gave him is no longer kodesh because I swapped it for the fruits. So therefore, I take the fruits. We don't care if it's kodesh, if it's shemitah, because whoever you can sell it to is going to eat it up in time. So what I did was I managed to take the kedusha off the money because I bought I bought fruit from him and I gave him the money. I wasn't interested in fruit, but I gave it to him. So what happened was the fruit became Shemitah, but the money is no longer Shemitah. And then we'll make a swap. He gives me a gift of the money. So now the money's back in my pocket, but now it's no longer Kodesh. And the fruit I gave back to him, and he'll sell it and he'll, whatever for Kodesh. And it'll only be used because it's small money. It'll be consumed in time. Allah gave him so you only can do it with your confidant. The paid fruits is a shenu. I have to buy and sell. It doesn't say I can just go ahead. What if I have to go to the storekeeper for? All I can do is go home and do the same thing with here. Take the money and say the money should move to the Paris. Why do I have to go to the store and go through this whole exercise of selling it to him and removing the kedusha from the money? Doesn't that prove that even second and third generation, you can only use it through swapping? According to those who hold, it has to be only through selling. According to those who hold, it can be only through selling. According to the Braisa. El Rashi. What Rashi meant to say was just opposite. Machlek is the whole machlek is a bit pre-sheni, whether it's even the second generation, you can use other methods besides selling, which is swapping. When it comes to the first generation, the first generation, everyone agrees it can only be done because there's so much kedusha there. You need a strong exercise, which is like selling it, where you mamish transfer the ownership completely, where we say that the kedusha leaves the kedusha passes on to something else. But once the kedusha passes on something else, it's no longer an intrinsic part of it. It's more on the surface. Then there's machlek is how we can do that. And that Braisa holds it has to be through selling, and Abiyachan holds it can be through selling or through swapping. My shvius, the may shvius. It says shmita here. It means actually the money of shmita. When it says that you can do it through selling, it doesn't mean or the Rabbeichan's price we brought. That's it's a shmita that means selling or through swapping. It's not talking about the first generation. It means the money of shmita, which is already the second generation. And I'll prove it to you for another reason. If you're saying that it means literally the original, so Shemitah means the original Shemitah, and even so the Braisa says you can go ahead and you can swap it, not like Ravashi, but the Braisa also says Maisa. So Maisa, we're talking about the original Maisa. No, how can you swap Maisa for, let's say, food? Well, that clearly that the original kedusha has to be transferred from the fruit onto money. El demei ma'aser. So we're talking about you already transferred it to the money of ma'aser. So here too, it's the money of shmita. So it's already a second generation, and that's what the Braisa says. You can either swap it or sell it, which is Rabbi Yechon. But the first generation, the original fruit of shmita, the only way to transfer kedusha is via selling it. Okay, that completes the sugya of shmita, and we'll continue tomorrow. Mitzvah Shem.